Hi, I'm Sarah from Ruby and Foxes with the next video in my How to Knit series. So this tutorial is a bit longer than the others as it covers the colourwork technique of Intarsia. Since this is what I specialise in, I wanted to include as much detail as I could think of to help you, but I've broken it down to labelled sections. The Intarsia method of knitting is to knit with separate lengths of yarn for each block of colour to create an image or pattern in your work like this. The next video after this will cover the fair isle technique, which I also use in my patterns. I tend to switch between both techniques depending on the size of the colour area I'm knitting. So for example here, you can see these colours are very close to each other. I use fair isle on these areas here, whereas I use Intarsia on these areas down here. If you were just starting out with knitting, I would make sure that you've mastered stocking stitch. So that's one row knit, one row purl, before you move on to colourwork. Otherwise, it may be a bit overwhelming introducing a new technique at this stage. If you want to knit along with the same pattern that I'm using here, it is available for free on my website to download at rubyandthefoxes.com, then click on Learn to Knit. I hope the following is helpful. I'd love to hear how you get on, so please let me know. We're now ready to knit row 16 where the colourwork begins. We are going to be introducing 5 new coloured yarns all on one row, which may sound challenging, but you'll be fine if you follow my instructions. As you can see, I've cut some lengths of yarn to approximately how much I think I'll need for each area. So you do the same, and don't worry if you cut them too short, because if you do run out halfway through, you can easily cut some more yarn to continue your knitting, as all the loose ends are hidden at the wrong side of your work. So from the front it will look as if it were knitted all in one piece. So for these blocks you can see that we have 2 areas of each colour to start with, which then meet at the top on our piece of knitting here. So I've got 2 of each colour and also some of the background yarn there for the middle of the rainbow here. And I then still have the yarn that we were knitting with to go up one side of the rainbow, and then another ball ready to continue the background up the other side there. So we're going to continue knitting in stocking stitch. So if you remember, odd numbered rows, and when the right side of the work is facing you, you're knitting in knit stitch. And for all the even numbered rows, and when the wrong side of your work is facing you, it's going to be knitted in purl stitch. Let me show you the Intarsia chart here, which you may already have a copy of as well. So to follow an Intarsia chart, you start at the bottom right corner where it says number 1. There's my finger, there we go. And odd rows are worked right to left and even numbers left to right, you can see there. So I put the numbers up the side where you need to follow from, so that that should help you with which direction you should be following across the chart. So if you see the number row you're on, you're following along from the number. So we're already at row 16, and so far we haven't had to use the chart really, as we've only been knitting in one colour. Now is when you need to start following the chart closely. We'll begin knitting row 16, so it's an even number, so we're knitting purl stitch and we're moving left to right across the chart. So count how many stitches you need to do in your first colour, and you can see there that's 5. So I'm just going to purl 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So again, looking at the chart, you can see we've got 2 stitches of each of the colours. So let's join in the first ball of red. Let's move that chart out of the way so you can see nice and cleanly behind me. So you're going to insert your needle as if you're about to make a stitch. but instead of using this yarn to work with, we're going to introduce the new coloured yarn. And you just need to make sure, again like when you started your cast on, that you leave a tail that's a couple of inches long so that you can weave it in afterwards. So there you go, a couple of inches long. I've wrapped it around that front right needle. Get hold of it. And I'm going to knit, do a purl stitch as normal there. So that's now joined that yarn onto the knitting. This yarn will just be left there for now, so just ignore it. And I'm going to do one more stitch because we know we've got 2 stitches to knit of each colour. So ignoring the tail yarn, taking the other piece, and there we've knit our 2 red stitches. Then we have yellow to add in, so again I'm going to insert my needle ready. I'm going to take my yellow yarn, leaving a tail a couple of inches long, wrap it around that right needle and purl stitch it in there. And then I'm going to do another purl stitch because we've got 2 stitches of each. This is kind of tricky knitting when I've got a camera in front of my face, so bear with me. Okay, another purl stitch. There we go. So you'll see, as we're knitting at the moment, there's some little gaps there where we've changed colour. That's absolutely fine, that's normal. Because we've just added in the yarn, there was nothing to attach it to so far. But that all gets fixed during the sewing up process once we've completed. So don't worry about that. When we knit the next row, you'll see that those gaps do close up a little bit and you see how we join the yarn together. So I'll do one more to show you with the green yarn. So I've inserted my needle ready to do a purl stitch. I'm taking the green yarn, wrapping it around that right needle, giving it a couple of inches length there so it doesn't accidentally come out and we've got enough length to sew it in. I'm going to do my purl stitch and then get those bits apart, another purl stitch. There we go. So you just need to continue like that all across the rest of the row, remembering to count your number of stitches each time. So this is fairly straightforward because you've just got 2 stitches for each of the colours. It's then 10 stitches in the middle to carry on that purple bow in the middle of the rainbow, then the other end of your rainbow here, and then introducing the purple again for your last 5 stitches. So I shall finish off knitting this row and I'll see you shortly. This is what it looks like with row 16 complete. So as you can see, a little chaotic with all these strands of yarn, but rather pretty as well at the same time. There are different methods you can use to help stop all these strands getting tangled as you're knitting. You can wrap them around a piece of card and then just release a length each time you need it. Clothes pegs work quite well as well. I've done it a couple of times with clothes pegs, but to be honest, for a small project like this where the lengths of yarn are relatively short, I don't worry about that. I find that every couple of rows you can shake free the tangles quite easily. So it's something for you to play around with and see what you prefer. So I've started to knit along row 17 and I've got to the stage where we're going to change from one colour to another, and I'm going to show you how you knit them together so that you don't have a gap. So I'm going to take this piece of yarn I just finished knitting with and I'm going to lay it over the red yarn I'm going to pick up and start knitting with. Can you see there? And it's kind of so it twists the 2 yarns together. It's more like overlapping really rather than a twist. So I'm laying the purple over that red and then I'm going to bring that red yarn in and start knitting. I've got my 2 stitches to knit there. Okay, you can see how you got some loops going on here, but that's just because of those tail ends. And what you can do is you can just pull on them gently, and you can see that tightens up your stitch and gets rid of the loop. Okay, I'll show you again with the yellow. So I'm taking that red yarn I've just finished knitting with, pulling it across, taking a hold of the yellow yarn, not the tail end. Where's it at? There we go. So I've got the red yarn over the yellow yarn, and I'm going to bring that yellow yarn up to knit with it. Like so. So it's a little bit tricky to show you because it's all happening at the back of the knitting in knit stitch. Hopefully you get the idea. So there's another one of those loops. So if I just take the tail end of that yellow and give it a gentle pull, you can see there, that's tied up that loop there. Right, I'll show you again on the green. So the colour I've just finished with, I'm going to pull across. I'm going to take hold of the next colour. You see all these different colours. You do have to have a bit of patience because you've got a lot of colours to deal with. And then I'm going to bring that round to knit with it there. And then again that tail, just going to gently pull, tighten that loop there. So there you can see it's bridged the gap. So there's the gap below when we introduced the new yarn where we couldn't do anything about that. You've got nothing to attach it to. But this row that we've just knitted here, you can see there's yarn connecting between the 2 different colours. And that is very important. The first time I tried knitting Intarsia, I had great big holes and couldn't figure out why. And it's that overlapping of the yarn that's critical. And that is what your row of knit stitch looks like. We'll now move on to a row of purl. So I've purled the first 5 stitches and we're at the stage where we're about to swap colours. So I'll show you what it looks like from the purl side. So again, insert the needle like a normal stitch, and see, it's a lot easier to show you from this way. You're just going to lay the yarn you've finished with over the yarn you're about to start knitting with, like that. So I'm going to knit 1, 2, there we go. I've just finished with the red. I'm going to lay that over and pick up the yellow. So it's literally just laying it over, and then I'm going to knit 2 stitches of that yellow. Well, purl stitch, but you know what I mean. Okay, show you again. So that yellow is going over the green, and I'm picking up there. There we go. So all those are nicely joined together. So I'm going to continue along this row, and I'm going to continue to knit to row 25 on the chart. As you do so yourself, make sure that you knit the correct number of stitches in each colour on each row, because you're not going to be knitting just 2 stitches every time, that you're going to start shaping that curve. So count your stitches for each block of colour. When we get to row 26, I'll show you what I do when 2 areas of colour meet, because at the moment obviously we're knitting these as separate blocks, but they are going to meet in the middle. So get to row 26 and I'll show you what to do next. This is what it should look like after you've knitted 25 rows. Hopefully that went okay for you. If you've got this far, you're doing amazingly well. This is not an easy project for your first Intarsia, since there are so many different colours. So if you've managed to get this far, you're doing an excellent job. I'm now going to just purl along the row, the next row, till I get to this part here, and I'll just show you what happens when we're joining in colour. Another tip, so we're now no longer going to need this purple yarn in the middle, because that's the last bit that we've knitted with it, because these blue colours are going to join. So what I've done is I've just snipped it off, leaving a couple of inches length. So I would say, especially when you've got lots of colours going on, as soon as you finish knitting with a particular yarn and you're not going to have it anywhere else in the pattern going on, just snip it off, and then it's one less yarn to get tangled into the back. So I've purled at the beginning of where the blue starts, and this isn't difficult. I just wanted to show you. I'm just trying to be thorough with all the little techniques that I use, and I'm literally just going to work right the way across to the other side, and then this yarn that I'm using becomes the working yarn for that section. So there we go, that has now become one whole piece there. So that was our working yarn. This was the yarn that we used to knit up the side. So what I'll do with that, the same as I did with the purple yarn in the middle, that is no longer required. So I'm just going to snip it off, because we can knit the rest of that blue piece with this section now. And you can do exactly the same when the other colours meet in the middle. I'll now continue knitting till I get to row 50, and then I'll move on to the next tutorial video. My next video after this will be a Fair Isle technique, but it'll be repeating knitting the rainbow. If you just wanted to use a different method and you're only using 2 colours. So if you've got to this stage using the Intarsia method, skip to the tutorial after that and skip the Fair Isle, and I'll see you there.